So you were at Fuentes de Ebro, right? For that battle.
Fuentes de Ebro, yeah.
And there was a big, the battle was delayed because of a lot of reasons.
Our participation was delayed.
Yeah.
We had a meeting the night before the battle, which I was largely responsible for organizing. I had achieved a certain power in the battalion, deliberately. There were 3 levels of command. There was a military commander, there was a political commissar, but the real power in the battalion was the organized Communist Party. And I had become secretary of that in the battalion staff. And I called a meeting, and this was a Communist Party meeting, a meeting where we would review the work of our political commissar. And we had such a meeting the night before. And it went on to the early hours of the morning. And even was so bad that it delayed our getting into the trenches by an hour or 2. That's not why we got clobbered. We got clobbered for other reasons. But we could have got clobbered for that alone. And Peter Carroll has a story of that meeting, but because he doesn't believe in laundering all of the laundry at that time, he doesn't include certain elements of it. The reason I was so excited and went after his ass, and despite the fact that he was a lousy commissar, really lousy.
What was his name?
What's that?
The commissar's name?
You know, I have these fits, you know that.
Oh, I should know too. I forget.
I'll help you remember. His widow married Oppenheimer from the atomic project. That's another story.
No.
It'll come to me in a minute. I do have intermittent. I have blocked. What do you call them?
Carteret.
Yeah, pretty. Matter of fact, they're severely blocked. So it's very disturbing. It happens to me pretty often, more often these days. But we'll get to it. He had sentenced me to death, and I had learned about it. I had, while in training, gotten into a collision with him about another soldier. I recruited a guy from my neighborhood. This guy came to me just before battle, and he said, "Abe, I can't do this. I'm going to disgrace myself, and I'm going to become a burden if it happens in the middle of battle. I'm not up to it." On top of which, I've been having very serious pains in my chest. So I went to him, the commissar, to plead a case. And he gave me a line of shit and said, "Now I know who's been organizing the discontent." He knew we all didn't like it. And he kept pointing the finger at me. And, "What do you got to say for yourself?" I said, "Go fuck yourself." I walked out on him. And 2-3 days later, his chauffeur, he had a chauffeur. We had one passenger vehicle, was drunk in a local village little pub, and he was friendly. He called me over and says, "Abe, you're in deep shit." He says, "These guys are organizing a memorial meeting for you back in Brooklyn. You're scheduled for execution." It did happen, by the way, to 4 or 5 people. That's part of, you know, it was imperfect. And maybe 2 or 3 of them, I wouldn't argue against it. But it's not a great way to handle the problem. Anyhow, when I learned this, I panicked. I got scared shitless, my first fear. Really scared. I don't know, what the fuck am I going to do? How am I going to handle this? And then I realized the only way I could get out of this is by terrorizing him. So I called some of the toughest guys from my neighborhood, really tough son of a bitches, and told them. And they said, "We'll take care of it." So they went up, we were out in the field, they went up and had a meeting, they came back and said, "It's all taken care of." I said, "What did you do?" He said, "We told him," I almost got the name again, "that if you get wounded from any direction but the front, soldiers get wounded from, we would immediately execute them on the spot." And they would do it.
Joe Dallet.
Huh?
Joe Dallet.
Joe Dallet.
Yeah.
He treated me with silk gloves the next day. He took painful measures to avoid me getting hurt. We went into combat the next day. I was part of a battalion staff. And we had Company 1 or 2 on one side, and Company 3 and machine on the other, and we're in the center, the battalion staff. I was on the battalion staff because I was in charge of mapping and scouting. Now, if you went out on a scouting mission, you did not have to go over the top. You could if you chose to, but it was not expected because you already had done a very shitty, difficult, dangerous job. So I came back, me and a couple of guys from the scouting mission, and we begin the attack, and I look over to the right, and our third company is not coming out of the trenches. It turned out later that the commander snapped. It happened. He snapped. And he just lost command totally, and the men were bewildered. So I yelled, I'm going over to the third company. And Dallas, no, don't. You don't have to go. I said, somebody has to go. No. And I just went. I succeeded in getting him out, but that's where I got shot. Meanwhile, I get back to the lines, and they take me, on a stretcher. And he, to prove he was a good guy, did something he needn't have done. He left the trench and went out to help a black comrade. And they both got killed. That's just Joe Dallett, to remember that. He was a bad medicine. Came from an upper class family, was a brilliant piano player, an honor graduate at Dartmouth, who decided to become a member of the working class. He talked like a worker. He acted tough like a worker. And he wasn't. He was a fucking intellectual farce.